Okay, who's after some corporate connections? Show of hands. Fantastic. Now, we have an absolutely fantastic lineup of panellists for you tonight to discuss how do you actually go about getting corporate connections, what is the sales process involved, and what kind of tools do you really need to arm yourself to make sure that you actually get those connections and take full benefit of those connections, because they can take time. So I'd like to introduce Robin Hayden from Winning Words, Bridget from Incognito Sum, yes, and John Allen as well. So a big round of applause, everyone. Now, Robin, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a bit about your background and where you come from, please?
Yes. And can you hear me down the back? Okay. My name's Robin Hayden. I'm a proposal strategist and writer, so I specialise exclusively in bids and pitches and sales proposals, tender responses, that sort of thing. I work mostly with large companies. My background is actually in large companies. I was general manager of marketing for an industrial company before I went out on my own 7 years ago. So, yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. And Bridget, tell us a bit about your background, because you've worked with some pretty major companies.
Yes, I have. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing,
yeah.
But there's none in the room, so that's okay.
Sorry.
I checked the list. I did my research. That's your first networking tip of the night. My background is in language. I actually am a brand strategist, and I specialise in naming things, companies and products and services. I fell into it about 15 years ago, and I'm very grateful I did, because I'm able to put things like my ability to speak useful languages like Ancient Greek and Latin and Esperanto into play. I also speak some more useful ones like French and Italian. But my background is in brand strategy. I only do words, no pictures. I don't do any design whatsoever, just the word strategy.
And what are some of the companies that you've worked with? Because you've worked with Cadbury Schweppes.
I can't talk about that one.
Okay.
That hasn't gone to market yet. But if any of you have ever been in the Qantas Club or drunk Sterling Lager or seen Metlink when you travel on public transport, if you're one of the 10 Australians who's a member of Australian Super, happen to have done a financial services course with Fincia, then they're one of the brands that I've created.
Fantastic. And John, tell us a bit about your background, because you've got a very interesting one.
Yeah, well, my background is journalism. I was at the Age newspaper for 25 years before I, what some people say, prostituted myself and went across the other side into public relations. The reason I went was Neil Comrie had just been appointed Chief Commissioner of the Victoria Police, and he needed a media director. So somewhat unwisely, after a long period at the Age, I went to the media department of the Victoria Police, which was a lot of fun. As soon as I went there, they started shooting people dead and raiding venues and driving police cars when they were drunk, and my job was to stand up there and say, "What's wrong with this?" You know. Then I went to Deakin University, where I headed up media and public affairs for the past 8 years. But I'm now running my own business, which is not spin doctoring. It's more communications and helping people just get a leg up into raising their awareness, I guess, mainly through media liaison and strategic media.
Okay,
yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Pass it back to you, Robin. Now, probably the first place to start out of any of this is with our researching these larger companies. What kind of research do we actually need to do to ensure that we actually get off on the right foot?
Well, the answer to that question is very specific research, because, as you were saying earlier, Ben, that was a very good point that you made. It's no good just saying my target market is big companies or my target market is a particular industry. It has to be a particular company with a particular problem that you know you can solve,
yep.
And there have to be a group of people in that company who are amenable to talking to you about solving that problem. So the first thing that you need to do is to have a really targeted list of probably no more than 10 companies that you want to approach based on what your value proposition is, what the problems are that you solve, and that you know that they have those problems and that they're motivated to solve it. So looking in the media about what companies are doing, making sure that you are reading the business press, that you are getting regular news feeds and updates, and even just having a Google alert set up for the names of the companies that you're interested in will get you stuff downloaded every day that will tell you what they're up to and what they're announcing in the press.
When we're looking for that kind of information, are we looking for the challenges that they're possibly having in the media, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking for an in, so you want to know what kind of problems they're facing, and it could be, let's say, for example, that you specialise in new product launches and helping companies with new product launches. Then you're looking for evidence that they're about to launch a new product, so you can actually go and say, this is the kind of thing that I do. I know you're about to do it. Let's have a chat, because you've got to get big companies at the right time. They just are too busy to listen to you unless they really, really have a need for you right now.
Now, how do we get past the really, really busy part? Because we know they're really, really, really busy and genuinely busy.
How do you get past the really, really busy part? Well, the key to that probably is knowing who the right people are to talk to and getting them at the right time. And that is simply, people don't want to talk to you for the sake of it. You need to have, you need to know that they're the person who's responsible for solving this problem, and that they have a problem that you can solve, and get to them at the time when they're motivated to solve it. That's really the only trick to it.
So we're looking for a department within the business that we're targeting?
Within large corporates, generally that's the way it works. And you need to find out what terminology they refer to themselves by, because if you have a particular product or service, you might say, well, I talk to people in a particular kind of department, but they may have different terminology for it. So you need to research the company, talk to people who work for the company, and find out how they refer to themselves, how they refer to that particular thing that you do. It might be training, or it might be development. It might be marketing, or it might be branding, or something like that. But they will have their own particular language that they speak.
Yep, fantastic. Bridget, tell us a bit about the research that you do before approaching large companies.
One of the things I look for is conflict of interest. A lot of the clients that I work with require me to sign documentation that means that if I'm working with one bank, I can't work with another one. So it doesn't matter how juicy a potential piece of business might be with another bank. I can't work with banks at the moment because I'm already working with one. In fact, I've got financial services pretty much sewn up across mortgages and funds and something else and something else. So that's one of the first things I do, is understand the nature of the business so I know whether they are actually a target or not. The other research is understanding how things like their product development and their marketing actually happens, and looking for what Robin referred to is what I call the person with the money. Who's the decision maker, the influencer? It's all very well to deal with a junior brand manager, but a junior brand manager is not going to engage me because they don't have the decision to make. Not going to sign your check. No. So I need to go. It's a bit like fishing. I go where the fish are. So I think about who the decision maker might be in an organisation. So it could be the senior communications manager. It might be the marketing director. The other strategy for me is to be a very glib third-party supplier. So often my research about the business is done once someone else has engaged me to provide the services that I do.
Okay. And how do you actually network for your clients? Give us some of your tricks and tips.
Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Don't think like you're running your business. Think like you're running their business. So if you're trying to deal with the marketing manager of a superannuation fund, go to the superannuation fund events. Don't go to the events that they're not going to go to. You've got to look at why you're networking and what you want to get out of it. So I look at having a professional network, a peer network, and then a business network. So when I think about business networks, that's where my fish are. So I might meet the marketing director at an American Chamber of Commerce event. They do some great lunches with some really high-profile speakers. But it's also about influencing other people in the decision-making process. So my relationships with clients don't always start as a direct relationship with the client. In fact, I had an experience a couple of years ago where someone I sat next to at a luncheon said, "Oh yes, that's really interesting, we do a bit of that." And I thought, yes, you do, because I'm actually your naming department, but you're so junior in the food chain that you don't know it. And that was the reality of it. So it didn't matter what influencing skills I had over that person at lunch. She was never going to engage me, and I realised that. So I was more interested in the relationship I had with her far more senior counterpart. And it sounds really hard-nosed, but one of the most important parts to remember with strategy is sacrifice. Chase after what you're interested in and forget the rest.
Okay. Now, how long, say for example, you've been after a larger company, what's the longest time you've chased after a company for? Is there one that you're still chasing after?
There's a couple of companies that I'd really like to do work with, but I can't because of existing relationships, so I'll wait till they disappear and then I can do it. The longest sales cycle has been 2.5 years, but that's because of the sales cycle of the business, and also because of the nature of the work. So if I do my job right and I rebrand and rename a business, then they're not going to come chasing me in 6 months' time.
Yep.
So unless you work with an organisation like Cadbury Schweppes, for example, where they do a lot of new product development, or you work with a multiple range of brands and therefore you have opportunities across the business. I've done a lot of work with Foster's that way as well, just by working across referrals from comms manager to comms manager. Yep.
So it's very much once you get in, you're in.
If you do the right job.
Okay.
If you don't, be a pain, you deliver. And to quote one of my clients, you make me look good in meetings. And if that's what you do as a supplier to them, then they'll come back over and over again.
So tell me a little bit about your own sales process. What does the sales process look like? Give us your inside information. Come on, we want to hear it, don't we?
Pretty much being indispensable.
Yep.
A lot of it is tied up with skills and the things that I offer that they don't offer. So it's really hard to find someone who can recite a mo, a mass, a mat, a mama, samata, samant within a marketing-based division of a company. That's Latin, I love, you love, he, she, it loves, etc., etc. That skill is what my clients buy from me. They don't necessarily buy my performance in meetings, although I do have to present to boards occasionally. But it's just about delivering what they want over and over again.
Yep. And how have you positioned yourself as, I guess, a unique commodity?
I don't want to say fairly easily, but I'm the only person in Australia who actually sets out their shingle and says, I name things for a living. You can buy similar services from marketing businesses, from design agencies, and I'd lay money that if you bought them from some design businesses, you're actually buying my services indirectly. So that they are out there to be had, but my sector is extremely niche in Australia, and that's actually one of the things that's been to my advantage, in that I've got a lot of clients who aren't the big businesses. They're the supplier, they're not the end client, and I make them look good in meetings. They don't have to know all of the stuff that I know.
And by positioning yourself like that, I'm assuming you've been able to charge a lot more.
Sometimes there's absolutely no budget. Sometimes the name, which is what I do most of, is the last thing they've thought about, or a trademark application has failed at the last minute because someone didn't do the checking, and I get a call saying, can you knock this over in 3 days?
Beautiful. Do we have any questions for Bridget or for Robin at this stage?
What about if you're targeting an organisation where you know that there may be an Australasian arm, then there'll be a global arm, that there's a bit of a silo mentality there, so you're having to double or triple or quadruple your effort, and perhaps the heads of all those different divisions don't get on, so then you've got this issue of perhaps conflicting loyalties. How do you deal with that?
I can answer that simply because I don't. I mean, my sales process is really very different to Bridget's because I specialise in pitches. Once a tender document comes out or there's a large bid on the table, people generally want to get going on that straight away. So the politics tends to go out the window. So for people who are involved more in political stuff, I think you could probably answer that one better than I could.
I'm thinking of an example with a large retailer that I work with. At one point, I had 3 different briefs from 3 different divisions of the business, and each of them told me different things about the brand, which was pretty scary. So I couldn't actually do anything about that because they didn't want to talk to one another, and they had 3 different objectives within the business. I won't say any more because I despair when I get things like that. But it's a matter of meeting the right people continuously, and if they're not getting on, then maybe making some decisions about who might be more lucrative for you and choosing to work with them, but also deciding what you're chasing them for, because you can chase a client for profile because they're good to have on your CV or as a client that you supply to. You can chase them for profit because they're going to pay you well, or you can just chase them because you want to do the job and you think it's really interesting work. So sometimes perseverance is the other thing. You know, if you really want to deal with that bigger business, then I just keep persevering and taking it and make yourself visible in other ways. Think about the points at which different parts of the business might intersect with you. So speaking, networking, getting engaged with other elements, media, which is your area, those sorts of things will help. But in terms of the tension in a business, it depends on the business and it depends on the culture as well, and whether they really just don't like each other or whether it's a deliberate tension when it's siloed like that.
Okay. You had a question as well?
Yeah, in terms of that advice of making them look good in meetings, I think that's great advice. Any kind of special tips how to do that? Because if you're going into a meeting with them, with a client, and you think you've got a great idea that it's probably better than what they've already got, and if you want to sell it to them, that may look a bit stupid or so. So how would you kind of try to make them look great in the meeting? Just proposing something which probably is much better than what they've got.
I'd first of all want to know whether they really want to go for something better. Because there's projects I've been involved with where client just doesn't want any more than what they've got. They're really happy with that. They won't push boundaries. They won't take risks. So when I say make them look good in meetings, give them what it is that they need to get whatever they're doing across the line, to get approval or get sign-off, get the brand into the market, and probably throw in a triple somersault along the way.
Just across the table.
Yeah.
Easy done. Now, what, in terms of, in the actual meeting sector, do you put across a lot of research that you've done to make them look good? To say, you know, X, Y, Z company have done this past, this was the result.
Generally, it really depends on the brief. One of the best things I can do for my clients is make solid, sensible recommendations that meet the brief, but also to ask them to step a little bit outside the brief as well, to maybe give them a name that goes beyond where they expected. A lot of clients just want what's in a box. They don't want differentiation. They say they do, but they actually don't. So what I try and encourage them to do is take a bit of a risk. If you don't feel slightly nervous or uncomfortable about what it is that you're doing, then you're probably not differentiating yourself in the marketplace enough to get the cut through. In terms of research, though, the best thing I can do is do all of that and then make sure that it doesn't mean poo in Chinese and that it's not being used by a competitor in an identical market. That some person down in Tasmania hasn't registered it as a trademark already, despite the fact that they're just a small business in Tasmania. They have the legal trump card on the big business in Melbourne. So that sort of research, and giving them solid stories to tell about the brand as well.
Yep, fantastic. John, I'm going to talk about the stories. In terms of these guys actually getting media attention, for example, and actually marketing to the corporate arena, how do they create a story that's going to capture their attention and is going to capture a paper's attention?
It's a really good question, and it's the media